to take a stack of compelling sources, historical analysis, theological writings, research notes, and really pull out the critical knowledge you need to be instantly well-informed.
We cut through the noise.
Exactly. We get straight to those aha moments.
Yeah.
Today, we're diving into a surprisingly fierce ideological conflict that really defined the early church and consumed the Apostle Paul, even late in his life.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at sources that focus on the core battle in his letter to the Philippians, specifically chapter 3. It's this clash between unconditional grace and, human-imposed conditions.
That's right. And the sources, they paint a fascinating picture because when Paul is writing Philippians, he's near the end, he's likely in prison, he's anticipating his death.
Right.
And yet the material confirms he is still wrestling with the same foundational challenge from years earlier in his letter to the Galatians. It's this relentless push for human requirements, what the sources call conditional law.
Okay, so let's unpack that, because that persistence is what's so surprising. I mean, when we think of that early chaos, we usually think of the Judaizers and the whole circumcision debate with Gentile converts.
Of course.
I have to admit, I kind of assumed that massive debate would have been, settled by the time he wrote Philippians. So what do sources say? Why wouldn't this conflict just die?
Well, it was so much more than a theological disagreement. It was really a deep identity crisis for the whole Christian movement. The sources really emphasize that these individuals, these were Jewish Christians who were dedicated to the Mosaic law. They couldn't psychologically
Or culturally.
Exactly. They couldn't release themselves from these practices that they'd observed for generations. For them, the law and tradition were just. They were completely linked to their identity.
So it wasn't just about getting the doctrine right. It was about defining who was in and who was out. And if grace is truly free for everyone, their special status just sort of vanishes.
Precisely. The documents we reviewed highlight that this constant pressure to impose the law was, in Paul's view, an evil attempt. It was an effort to permanently attach a human qualification marker.
Like a status tag.
A status tag, that's a great way to put it. A tag based on personal effort or a physical right onto the gospel of absolute grace. They were insisting that Gentile believers needed circumcision as a required step, a kind of human contribution for full salvation.
A contribution that just completely undermines the sufficiency of Christ's work.
Yeah.
And that explains Paul's really extreme reaction. He saw this as making them an enemy of the cross.
Yes.
But, Paul was a legal expert. Wouldn't he, of all people, understand the appeal of a system based on performance? Why does he treat this like an existential threat and not just some, minor theological misunderstanding?
Because he knew that system from the inside out. He understood its seductive power. The sources make it so clear that Paul's argument in Philippians 3 isn't just philosophical, it's deeply, deeply personal. Before he even dismisses his opponents, he does this amazing rhetorical move. He shows that if anyone had the credentials to boast, it was him.
Right. Let's talk about his qualifications.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a guy with an absolutely spectacular resume. His human achievement, his dedication, his pedigree, it's off the charts.
It really is. The source material details his achievements, which were essentially an unapproachable A-list of religious specs. He lists them out. Circumcised on the 8th day. That's the physical marker of belonging, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin. So, pure lineage. A Hebrew of Hebrews, confirming his cultural and linguistic purity. And crucially, as to the law, a Pharisee.
And that last one is huge. It doesn't just mean he followed the rules. It means he was a professional, rigorously dedicated to the highest religious standards of the day.
His zeal for the law was noted by his peers as unapproachable. He was the ideal. If human effort could earn you favor with God, Paul had already maxed out the credit limit.
He was completely untouchable in terms of his religious performance.
But that's what makes the central confession of Philippians 3 so mind-bending. Paul puts all these incredible achievements forward only to immediately declare them utterly useless and worthless when you weigh them against knowing Christ.
This isn't just a small adjustment.
No, it's a total ethical and spiritual bankruptcy declaration against his entire former life.
And this is where the language gets shocking and, frankly, unforgettable. He doesn't just say his achievements are useless or a loss. He uses an analogy that still makes people pause today. He compares everything, his old life, his religious zeal, everything he was proud of, to rubbish.
Or manure.
Yeah, even manure.
The Greek term he uses is skubala, and it's visceral. It means waste, refuse, excrement. It's a deliberately graphic metaphor.
He wants you to be shocked.
He does. He wants to convey this sense of utter, repulsive worthlessness when you place it next to Christ. It's a complete, radical revaluation. I mean, think about it. Everything he had lived for, everything that gave him status, he now willingly throws overboard as garbage.
Which shows just how completely his life philosophy was overturned. He moved from this meticulous conditional legal framework to the radical freedom of unconditional love.
Yeah, his conversion experience basically changed the entire economy of his life. It went from a system of earning and accumulating merit to one of just receiving a gift.
So we get the radical nature of Paul's shift, but let's go back to the resistance. Why was this conditional law the one thing Paul had to fight against until his death? Why did this idea of unconditional love make the Judaizers so profoundly uncomfortable?
I think if we connect this to, the psychology of it all, it really comes down to control, identity, and maintaining a social hierarchy.
Right.
The material we looked at synthesizes two major motives for their deep-seated attachment to the law's conditions. They just couldn't let it go because grace threatens centuries of their established identity.
And what was that core psychological threat?
Well, the first threat was to their self-effort. Unconditional grace completely destroyed what our sources call the Tower of Babel of self-righteousness.
That's a powerful phrase.
Isn't it? This thing they had spent millennia building through ritual and observance and public tradition. If salvation is genuinely a free gift, through faith alone, with zero input from your performance, then all their effort becomes redundant. Their high religious status, built on rigorous adherence, it just collapses overnight.
It levels the playing field.
Completely. It makes the most rigorous Pharisee no more righteous in God's eyes than the tax collector who just accepts grace.
That's a staggering loss of, professional and social capital. If their religious expertise is meaningless, their whole power structure is too.
Absolutely. And the second motive is maybe even more deeply ingrained. It addresses their ethnic and national identity.
Their privilege.
Their nationalistic privilege. For centuries, they believed they were God's chosen people, set apart by the sign of the covenant circumcision, grace available to everyone, regardless of your heritage or a physical right. It dissolves their unique privileged status.
It shatters the boundary between Jew and Gentile. It removes the very thing that had defined them.
It does. And the sources suggest this combination of accumulated self-effort and inherited identity is precisely why they could not let go. This wasn't just theological quibbling. It was a desperate attempt to maintain control and status.
Wow. That's a massive psychological anchor to have to deal with. So to counteract this constant pullback to the self, Paul offers a radical replacement. He pivots from what he rejects, the rubbish, to defining his new single-minded pursuit.
Yes, and this is where we get to Paul's solution. His new, singular life goal. He wasn't aiming for a life free of rules. He was aiming for an identity that was completely consumed by Christ.
And that goal was?
Participation. Participation in Christ's death and resurrection.
Okay, so detailing the essence of that is key, because it's more than just belief. It's this concept of I die and Christ lives in me is the ultimate aim. It's the total inversion of the conditional life.
It is. You move from focusing on what I achieved to focusing on the power of what Christ accomplished and now does through me.
That's a huge shift.
And Paul articulates it perfectly in a passage that just captures the singularity of his purpose. This is his final anchor, Philippians 3, verses 10 and 11. He says, I want to know Christ and experience the mighty power that raised him from the dead.
Okay.
I want to suffer with him, sharing in his death, so that one way or another I will experience the resurrection from the dead.
So he's not seeking merit anymore. He's seeking this intimate, lived experience with Christ, even if it means profound suffering. It's a quest for depth of relationship, not height of achievement.
And what stands out for us, as analysts of this material, is the implication of that goal. It means the only thing that matters is the knowing. Everything else that seemed essential before lineage, performance, status is utterly secondary.
So what does this all mean for us today? The sources really encourage a powerful kind of self-examination, one that goes beyond just historical theology.
It really does. It challenges you, the listener, to do a similar reevaluation. To identify any self-imposed rules or achievements, any internal qualification markers that you believe are prerequisites for favor or success or acceptance.
And then what?
And then to cast them off as rubbish when you compare them to the value of unconditional acceptance, the focus has to be solely on that confirmed unconditional love.
And it's so easy to create those markers in our modern lives, isn't it? Professional success, social media perfection, moral superiority. They all function as our own version of those conditions.
Absolutely. The modern equivalent of that Tower of Babel of self-righteousness is constantly tempting us to prove our worth. Paul's solution is a radical shortcut.
Yeah.
Just surrender the proving entirely for the certainty of receiving.
The enduring lesson of Philippians 3, then, from the material we analyzed, is this radical clarity you get when the superior knowledge of Christ forces you to jettison all your self-made conditions and inherited privileges.
It's a profound shift, from the burden of earning to the freedom of receiving. And that leads us to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. If Paul's lifelong, unapproachable zeal, his impressive pedigree, and all his accumulated religious effort were deemed mere rubbish in comparison to unconditional grace,
Then what?
what seemingly necessary conditions or self-imposed expectations might you still be clinging to today? Maybe without even realizing that they're distracting you from the singular goal of genuine knowledge and relationship?
That's the question that forces all of us back into the source material for some deeper reflection. We encourage you to continue exploring the context of this massive theological shift.